This is Shalom World Podcast.
Have you ever thought about the clash between our digital world and what's right and wrong? That's where The Porn Disaster comes in, a series that dives into one of society's most hush-hush topics. Get ready for some real talk as we dig into the ups and downs of today's tech-driven desires. Kids, relationships, recovery, we're not holding back. From the Catholic Church's take on porn to why our brains get hooked, we cover it all. Join us as we chat about the messy stuff, the good, the bad, and the uncomfortable. Hosted by Patricia Keane, we've got an expert panel here to chat about porn addiction, what it does, how it affects us, and how we can heal.
Hello, welcome to Shalom World. My name is Patricia Keane and I'm coming to you from Maynooth in County Kildare. I'm here to present a 12-part series on pornography called The Porn Disaster. We've been looking at porn from all different aspects, and in this episode we're continuing to look at porn from the adult point of view. And that is, we're going to debunk some myths around pornography. And my guests here today:
Father Alan Hoffa, priest from the Diocese of Allentown, USA. He has BA in Philosophy and Masters in Divinity. Father Chris Hayden, priest from the Diocese of Ferns, Ireland. Spiritual Director, St. Patrick's Seminary, Maynooth. Professor Patricia Casey, Professor of Psychiatry at University College Dublin, Ireland. She is a psychiatrist, journalist, commentator on social issues. Dr. Kielty Oberlin. She's from Ireland, doctorate in psychology and master's in counseling, specializing in eating disorder recovery.
So we're going back to look at some more issues around adults and porn, and particularly the myths that are surrounding pornography. So the first one I want to look at is rather big. It's how porn treats those it portrays, above all women, as objects rather than persons. What does this mean and what is the harm? So I'll go to you first, Father Chris, on this one.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. Yes, that's it's been said that the most precise opposite of to love someone is not to hate them, it's to use them. It's to treat what is personal, a person, as subpersonal, purely as an instrument, a tool, an object. That's really the opposite of love. Because if we hate someone, not that we want to be going around hating, but at least I have an emotional connection. I am just completely cold with regard to a person I want to use. And that's treating a human person as a tool, a subhuman, in a subhuman, impersonal way. One of the myths, and I guess it's myth in inverted commas, but a myth around pornography, and this might speak especially to young people, perhaps to adolescents, because it shifts away from a kind of a moral comment to a broader, more human, a very human take on it. It's not that pornography shows too much, it's that it shows too little. When someone is looking at, if a man is lusting over a graphic image of a woman and over pornographic images of women, he's not seeing too much, he's seeing too little. What is he not seeing? He's not seeing a daughter, he's not seeing a mother, he's not seeing a broken heart, he's not seeing someone who's been exploited, someone who's going to terrible lengths to try to make ends meet, someone who's trying to deal with their own past traumas. He's not seeing any of that. So he's seeing far too little. And that's what pornography does. It takes a whole human person and it reduces them to their body parts. And that's using, it's objectifying, and it's very wrong. And I think in emphasizing that particular myth, that it shows too little rather than showing too much, we kind of shift the focus away from, oh, well, this is wrong, you mustn't do it, to, what do you care about? Do you care about people? And that's a different kind of a question. It's also a moral question, but it's a warmer kind of a way of approaching things.
Okay, and that is not something that anybody considers when they're watching pornography. Does that apply to women who watch pornography?
I assume it does. We don't know very much about women and pornography because by a ratio of 2-to-1, pornography use is much more common in men than in women. But I would assume that they engage in it for the same reasons as men do, because they want to get kicks. They want the surges of pleasure that go with sexual activity, only doing it using distant almost inanimate people. To come back though to a related issue that Father Chris mentioned, when people engage in pornographic activity, there's a bit of a ritual about it, in that people have to switch on their monitor, they have to sit down, they have to go into the site, and then they look at the screen and they have an orgasm or ejaculate or whatever while they are watching it. But what they're seeing on the screen is usually a personification of a woman that, I mean, at one level they are human beings, because there were women who were photographed for this and who participated. But when the individual is looking at them, they're not seeing a human being. It's just an object who is completely different from any other woman they will probably ever meet in their lives. Most women do not look like the women who feature in pornography. So what people are falling for and become attracted to, and what generates the flow of dopamine and oxytocin, is this unrealistic image on a screen. They're not touching, they're not feeling the person, they're just sitting there watching them with their hands on the table or whatever. And that's a very odd way of relating to human beings. Most of us, we reach out to people, we shake their hands, we hug them. Even professionally, you would shake hands with somebody. So what's the whole interaction is a remote, cold interaction, and getting a surge of dopamine or any other neurochemical from such an encounter is quite abnormal. And so for anybody to say that a bit of pornography is okay and it'll enrich your marriage, it makes no biological or psychological sense when you think of it in terms of this distant, inanimate person that the watcher is getting their thrill from.
Thank you for explaining that. It comes together when you start bringing in the neuroscience. Father Allen, I know you want to get in on this, but I want to come to Kielty first, because you're working with young girls, okay? And the question that they're coming to you because of eating disorders, but you examine every aspect of their life to see what is going on. And you said in a previous segment that they're not connecting that the pornography, the looking at pornography to the eating disorder. Now, so what are the young girls telling you about how they feel about their own body? What's it doing to their own image?
When they're coming, when people come in, they're coming in for specifically, I want help with the eating disorder. But as we delve into their relationships with self and with other people, we start to see that there's this longing for connection with other people, to feel safe, secure, good enough. And I've heard it, I'll say give an example of, I've heard this a number of times where, let's say somebody is beginning to date and beginning to consider sexuality and the relationship, and they know that the boys are watching porn, they begin watching porn. So their purpose for engaging is to, see what is attractive to them, and are shocked, upset, and horrified. So it's not necessarily they weren't engaging for pleasure, but they were trying to find out, what are these guys attracted to? And then immediately they begin to say, I can't compete with that. I don't know if I want to compete with that. So it sets up these expectations of not. Now the other thing is that when and if, like Patricia, I love the way you put that so aptly, when somebody is stimulated and they experience sexual pleasure when watching, then it almost is as if they need to be, it sort of sets this standard of, this is what I need to be attracted to. So for the girl and for the boy, I know I just switched here, but for the girl and the boy, it's setting standards for what they should be attracted to. However, in the real world, we're not finding, like Patricia's saying, we're not finding that. So basically it's setting up that this whole idea of objectification, it's setting up the idea that sex is to be done. It's an activity, and both the men and the women are objects in that. So it's reinforcing that, setting up a conflict. And there's not, I think the idea of when people, because I also hear this, that a myth that pornography can be educational is one that needs to be knocked out of the water, because, as Patricia said, as we're all saying, it's not reality. The whole experience is not reality. And I kind of think it just reinforces objectification. And what we really need as humans, we're striving for connection. And that is absolutely not possible with a screen.
Listening to Kielty there, I'm mindful of a comment from the American feminist Naomi Wolf, and this is apropos of the whole idea of, who can compete with these perfected images on the screen. And Naomi Wolf says very tellingly, compared to the pornographic images, real women are just bad porn. That's the way a lot of male brains get rewired, to have these impossible expectations.
Real women are just bad porn.
So that's obviously ruinous for relationships and for just normal male-female.
That's quite a sad comment. That's a downgrader straight away. Father Alan, you're bursting to get in there.
I really am, because all three have given me so many things that connect with this wonderful ministry that I've been called to in working with people at all ages, and male and female. And, when I speak to young people, and especially when I teach, one of the things that I want them to always take away, if there's anything you're going to take away from this whole year of education, it is the exact fact to which you spoke to, that the opposite of love is use. We, as a society, have dumbed down love so much that we allow all of these usury methodologies in our human experience to be cloaked over as love. And what that does is it leads to the ability for objectification. Because once I allow myself to be used, I'm giving myself willingly into the objectification. No woman, for instance, would say, oh, I'm willingly giving myself to objectification. I want that for myself or for women in general. And yet, it's important to see that it does happen easily. And with that, we've seen that the rise in eating disorders, especially, has come with the proliferation of so much pornography, because it's the way in which I feel about myself. But the warp that happens in there, as you said, Kielty, is a woman goes and she feels that she can't compare, but also what happens is, in not comparing, I do need something relational, and the porn becomes that thing that becomes my relation too, that I need, and the man has that relation. And I think that also connects with Professor Casey said, in the fact that when we look at women, the difference is their emotional intelligence is different from men. And so what we see on the pornography level is that women, when they look at porn, a lot of men, they'll look at a still frame, or they will look at the actual act of a sexual act. Women are much more inclined to a video that tells a story. They're more inclined to pornography that is written. For instance, we think back to the rage that 50 Shades of Grey was. That was the start of a real big porn push, and people think that wasn't porn. Oh yes, it was. It was written porn, and then of course it became a movie, because it hits that emotional core that women especially are more inclined towards than men, that fulfills that. And I wanted to, this was also our teaser from the last episode with Professor Casey, is as we're talking about those neurochemicals, one of the things when we do this work is we talk about the acronym PMO, pornography, masturbation, orgasm. And one of the things that happens is a lot of people, they'll recount that after they've done PMO, that they feel awful. And that's what we call a chemical dump that happens, especially with that oxytocin. And this is something that on a general level of human sexuality is often lost, especially with the sexual act. What is meant to happen after man and woman, husband and wife, come together in the unitive sexual act is that there's supposed to be connectedness after that. That once you hit that pinnacle, then it slowly comes down. But what happens with the PMO is once you've hit that peak, you completely plummet, because there's no one there. You're not, the screen's not going to comfort you. There's no one there to comfort you. And that has such a negative effect, again, chemically on the brain that can be so very, very destructive. So this whole thing that no one's being harmed in this, no, the objectification of women, the harm to the person on a chemical level, on an emotional level, on a physiological level, it's all happening. And these are so many of these different facets of pornography.
And of course, flowing from that, just to come back to the reality of lovemaking, after a couple of husband and wife have made love, they usually go to sleep in each other's arms.
Exactly.
And there isn't any arm to hold.
Bingo.
There's nobody for you to envelop afterwards and say, I love you to, or that was great, or whatever. It's just an empty screen.
Exactly.
And hence the emptiness. The emptiness.
I want to come back to the boy and the girl again, the expectations that boys have of girls, okay, in a relationship. And Father Ed, I'm coming back to you on this one because you have the experience, because you've been in high schools, okay, and then you're dealing with 17 and 18-year-olds and younger. But I have, in researching for this, I've come across information about what boys want to do with girls during sex, and it's frightening to read it, the expectations, that they've been watching pornography and they want to take it into a relationship with a woman, and it involves strangling, choking, masturbating all over their body, whipping. It's really so incredibly nasty. Now, you've been in the schools, you've been hearing this, so just take us through that.
Well, the big thing is, Patricia, is that this isn't limited to the schools and to young people.
Yes.
This is happening in marriages. This reality of what's being seen is being transposed from the screen into every age. I think I may have mentioned in a previous episode, but one of the things that's on the rise because of pornography is rape in marriages, because there are women who do not want to enter into these recreations of what their husbands are seeing on these screens, but they're forced to. And again, defined, doesn't matter if you're married or not, defined forcible sexual encounter is rape, is sexual assault. And so we see that, yes, now the difference is that because of the maturation process, adults, while they can still sink into depression because of these things and can recede from society and relationships, for a younger person, it is even more damaging because they feel that they don't have a voice. They haven't had those life experiences that gives them the willingness to fight back, bounce back. And so it can be especially dangerous for them. But across the board, we're getting into this whole thing. And as Professor Casey said, and we've all brought up in different ways, is the deepening of this as it goes deeper and deeper, that need to get that next fix. And I use that word next fix because we know so much about drugs, the corollaries of how this works. And yes, we don't know as much because the longitudinal studies haven't been done in regard to pornography, but we see so many crossovers, especially with things like drugs, that we can say that the deepening of that next fit, it gets worse and worse and worse. The problem is that we know that death can occur because of drugs. And it's not so much the death that happens to the physical body with pornography, but the death that happens to the soul, the death that happens to the esteem, the death that happens to the will, the death that happens to the heart. And that can be so destructive, especially for a young person, because they have the rest of their life. They're going to look for their spouse. What does that tell them about who their future spouse should be? Someone that should abuse me, assault me, and that is okay because pornography is okay. It's widely accepted. So this must be normal. And what's also done is that they're pushed into silence where they don't talk about it because there's a part of them that says this is embarrassing, this is hurting me, and yet at the same time they have this voice of the person who's supposed to love them who's saying this is okay, this is what we should do, and it becomes very confusing.
Just following up on Father, is the young people, the scary thing is that it's so pervasive. We know we're seeing the numbers, and whenever we see numbers, we can assume, because there's shame attached to it, that the number's actually even greater. I'm hearing the stories, and And the scary thing is that we're coming into a generation of kids that are believing that this is sex. And adults,
And it's normal.
That sex is that pornography, sex, like what's happening in the screen, BDSM, all of the, where you hear derogatorily vanilla sex. So with vanilla sex, which is human lovemaking.
Normal heterosexual penile, vaginal sex. So it's talked about as a derogatory, as if this other stuff, and so people are considering it as excitement. And when you think about it, it's coming in. It made me think when you talked about 50 Shades of Grey, that it came into the average middle-aged and older populations, and began to be talked about. Well, that piques an interest, and people go looking. And so the whole idea, the value of sex is getting diminished. And so what that is it's reinforcing for this whole next generation that this is what they think. And so that reinforces everything that we're saying about objectification. And that's the scary bit.
Go ahead.
Now I think we need a bit of hope.
Oh, here we do, and we're here because we believe that there's a battle to be fought, and we're fighting because we believe it's winnable. So there's hope, of course. What's needed behind and above and beyond all of this is a framework of view. What is we can't, people, societally and individually, nobody can get out of the morass unless they're holding on to something. And it's not about like providing an emergency life raft and then we go back to shore. And it's a limited analogy, but the reality is, unless we have a framework of understanding for our human nature as sexual human beings, unless we have a clear understanding, then we're only ever doing damage minimalization. We're saying this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong. We can complain ad infinitum about what's wrong, but what is right is a sound, solid understanding of human sexuality as a vehicle for self-gift, for self-giving love. We talk about love-making. I mean, that tells its own story, that expression. But culturally, all of this is associated with a particular faith angle. If you try to talk about the sense behind sex and so forth, you can be immediately painted into a corner. So the very thing that's needed is the most difficult thing of all to proclaim. And yet proclaim we must, because it has struck me repeatedly during these conversations over the last several episodes, the seamless fit. It's hand in glove between the Catholic moral position, the Catholic, and underlying that, the Catholic anthropology, the understanding of the human person, the seamless fit between that and the issues we are discussing, even at the psychological, neurobiological level, the stuff that's going on. It's not a separate planet. We're whole cloth in the end of the day, our human nature, and the truths of our faith, which are not little niche doctrinal truths, but fundamental human truths, they speak to these things. So we have a lot to offer, and we must try to continue offering it articulately, compassionately, gently, but perseveringly.
Well, we're out of time on this one. We knew it was going to just fly through because we had so much discussed. But what we try and do is anything that we haven't covered, we bring it into the next episode. So I want to look at in the next episode is, have we become a pornographic people? How has that happened? And is the pursuit of sexual gratification a good thing? And what are the principles undergirding pornography? Okay, so please join us for our next episode.
And that wraps up another episode of The Porn Disaster. Thank you to our incredible panelists for sharing your expertise and insights. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in and being part of this important conversation. If you've been impacted by anything we discussed today, know that help is available. Understanding leads to healing, and by shedding light on these tough topics, we are one step closer to positive change. Join us next time for another enlightening discussion. Until then, take care and stay curious.
Shalom World Podcasts is now available on all online platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others.